Okay, Rebecca, today we're here to talk about the three Ps, about which I know absolutely nothing. I glanced over the podcast that you got this from, but it was a glance. You've taken it more seriously. You want to explore it. The three Ps, enlighten me.
Okay. Yeah, it was just something that really caught my eye. And the three Ps are relating to types of characters that people will often take on, probably unconsciously. It's not necessarily a conscious decision. But the three Ps are politician, preacher, and prosecutor. And most people will fall into one of those three things, which basically means they have a particular viewpoint that they're quite committed to, and the preacher will obviously try and preach their ideas around that.
That's
The,
me.
yeah, and I probably fall into that one to some extent as well. I think the politician, trying to, well, be a politician, I suppose, about things. I guess you could take
You
that in
mean
a,
lying, cheating, taking
yeah,
15
well, that's
jobs
what I
and
just thinking. That could be taken in a few different ways, and the prosecutor always trying to sort of defend their position, I suppose, in some respects, and making the other person wrong, I think, is the
making a
prosecutor.
case. Yeah.
Yeah, making their case. So in the podcast that you're referring to there, they were sort of advocating for an alternative viewpoint, which
Mhm.
is the scientist.
Ooh, the scientist.
And the idea behind this was encouraging people to see their opinions as hypotheses to be tested,
Yeah.
rather than having a very set viewpoint that's very narrowed and
Mm.
blinkered. As a scientist, if we treat our opinions as a hypothesis,
Hmm.
it suggests that we're more open to hearing other people's opinions and viewpoints,
Sure.
and being open to persuasion if we feel that it's appropriate to do that. And I think that's the thing that really got me, and I really liked that, because I think it would encourage better and healthier conversations between people. So I guess that's the sort of thing that had got me on this.
So it's about encouraging people to explore positions, not to push truths as they see it.
Yes, because sometimes what happens if you take on one of the P positions,
Mm.
then you have your viewpoint, and it's
Yeah.
quite blinkered and it's quite limited,
Yeah.
and you feel that you have to get your viewpoint across,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that in particular, but it can sometimes be, it can create sort of that narrow-mindedness and not being able to listen to other people. I think sometimes it blocks your ears when you've got that one position.
And also, it's constricting, isn't it? It restrains development. If the only position you ever hear is your own, and the only position you hear defended is your own, then that's all you've got.
Yeah, and I think that's what ends up in some of these organizations and bigger places, is that they tend to only get people around them that have very similar viewpoints to themselves. But then this is what can lead to possibly stagnation, even,
Oh, yeah.
because you're not getting new points of view in, and you're not being challenged. I think actually it can be quite healthy to be challenged.
Oh,
It
yeah.
might actually
Yeah.
strengthen your belief in
Oh,
what you.
undoubtedly. I've spent decades saying that. Um, I used to say to people, be like me and you'll be okay. That's what I see here. The only people I agree with are people who, when I'm not going to mention a certain high profile, hopefully not for much longer, American politician of these times, 2024, who personifies this. My way is the only way. And your way? No, I don't get that. No, 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 no. So, yeah, they'll all be like me and you'll be okay. Sameness and diversity. We hear talk about diversity, don't we? Everyone talks about it. And yet I still see men dominating in grey suits, boardrooms, and the same old stuff. So, yeah, challenge, grow, seek different opinions. Got to be good.
Yeah, I think so. And it's how we do that. It's not always comfortable, or, something that you want to hear when people are challenging your viewpoint. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the difficulty. But being open-minded and not taking things personally, I think if you're a scientist and you can be willing to hear other viewpoints, I think it actually generates more ideas as well when you're willing to
Oh, yeah.
have open mind about things
Sure.
and take things on board. It helps to generate more ideas, not just stick down the same track all the
Yeah.
time as well.
Well, I am interested in this. It's one that we got close to doing. Then I moved house and did all sorts of peculiar things, um, mostly moving house. So we've delayed this, and it's given me time to think about it. And and it's funny you mentioned the scientist thing. Well, funny, it's very topical because I like scientists. I've come to really like scientists because working with some as I now am in a coaching way, I like their persistence, I like their focus, and I like their curiosity,
Mm.
all of which doesn't describe most of the people I work with. And a scientist is always looking for something better. They're not looking to hang on to what they've got. It's the opposite. I'm looking for something that improves where I'm at. That's their whole purpose. And to me, they personify this. I'm not surprised you're hanging the word scientist on this.
Yeah, I think that's the key word there, is the curiosity. And a
Mm,
scientist also looks for evidence to prove things
yeah,
right or wrong.
yeah,
And they're open to that because that's their hypothesis, the
yeah,
testing it basically. Is this true or is this false? And I think
yeah,
that's really helpful. So rather than just taking things blindly and taking somebody else's word for it, they're actually
yeah,
testing it out. Well, what's the evidence for this? Is that
yeah,
actually the facts? Or,
yeah,
and so I just think if we can encourage people to be a little bit less stuck in their ways and not to take, because I think the problem comes because people take it personally and they see it as a personal insult to them if their view is not,
sure.
sort of taken. Where I think if we can encourage people to just be a little bit more open-minded and be willing to look outside the box, I think it can generate more ideas, much more productive conversations, and a healthier dialogue as well.
Yeah, we've had that sort of discussion in relation to introversion, which I'm getting accustomed to using the term personality discrimination, where we just say, no, you're quiet. I'm not even going to seek your opinion because you don't say it. It can't be worth anything. So this is another sphere of being exploratory, being a bit more prepared to extend your boundaries into, I wonder what better ideas there are than mine out here. How often do we hear that said?
Very, very rarely.
Oh, yeah, that. And yeah, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, yeah, that was my, my encouragement is to be more scientist.
Well, see, there are other things I like about scientists. Their method, they're structured in their thinking, and they have a method. They're
Yeah.
methodical. They are methodical indeed. They're methodical. They have a system. They're resilient. They're persistent. They're all the things that the HR industry talks about all the time, but I don't see other than the scientists because scientists don't give up. They keep going until they find an answer, even if it's a different answer than they thought they'd get, or an uncommon answer. But I mean, I read something about how many times Edison failed, so-called, before he discovered light bulbs or invented light bulbs. And the same for all sorts of people who invent things. They just keep at it for lifetimes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, isn't it, in terms of being able to research things, and like you said, just not giving up on things and finding out the evidence and whether something is really true. But that I like the curiosity thing that you mentioned. I think that
Yeah,
that for me has been key. I'm curious. I wonder why that person
yeah.
believes that or what they're seeing that I'm not seeing from this.
Yeah,
And I think
Fleming comes into
having
his
that,
laboratory and sees a petri dish that's got bacteria growing on it. He says, "That's odd," and that got his curiosity, from which came penicillin. Now, unless you're doing things that provoke curiosity, then you haven't got that driver, that energy. So something needs to happen, and scientists are always doing something to provoke. It's a stimulus response thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a scientist, but my impression of scientists is they're constantly trying new things. Perhaps their chefs are the same. What about put this with this? What it'll taste like?
yeah, I like that idea as well. I think there is something around that experimentation as well, isn't it? I want to experiment on this. So I wonder
Yeah,
if I do this, what will happen? If I do that, how will this person
yeah,
respond?
yeah.
Yeah.
If I put carbon with iron? Do I get steel? Or, I mean, I was in Sheffield, you're in Sheffield. So people invent metals by doing things. People invent recipes by doing things. And those are curious people who are looking to push boundaries. This all seems to resonate with everything that I pick up on, that is encouragement about organizational life. Push boundaries, use your talent, don't sit still, accept challenge. I mean, these are all things which are hard to argue against.
Yeah, and there's a certain willingness there to take risks, I suppose, isn't there?
Yeah.
And being vulnerable. I think to some extent it's about that willingness to be vulnerable
And to
as
be
well.
wrong.
Yes. Oh, that's a good one, isn't it? A willingness to be wrong. Hmm.
Well, now it's stopped. That stopped us in our tracks because we're then, right then, okay. And this is true for organizations, it is for individuals, isn't it? Because if, as an individual, you sit complacently on what you've achieved, where you've got to, what you can do, then everything stops.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't grow anymore and it doesn't innovate.
So we started with the three Ps and we've really branched off here. But as you said, the three Ps were about not being those things, but being more of a scientist, and now perhaps more of a chef.
Yes, I like it. Scientist or chef.
I think some chefs would see themselves as a scientist.
Yeah, definitely that experimentation as well. So yeah.
So getting this to the reality of organizational life, what specifically does this cause us to want to see more of?
Being willing to be open-minded, and there's got to be a willingness there, and maybe there needs to be a recognition first of all that perhaps you could see things differently. I think that comes first. You've got to recognize. Yeah, yeah, and then a willingness to accept that there could be a different way, and then being curious about what could those different ways be or opinions be, rather than being. I think sometimes people get very set on one particular idea or one particular direction, and then we'll fight really hard to keep that, even if it's not necessarily the right thing anymore. They sometimes sort of lose track of the bigger picture.
I knew someone who used to refer this as, I have a lot of emotional capital invested in this.
Yeah.
And when you've
and I
been in
think
a position for a long time, it's hard to give it up.
yeah, and I think that's the thing with the three Ps, the politician, preacher, and prosecutor. They all have a big emotional investment in that. And that can be really helpful to be emotionally invested in it. But I think sometimes that can also distort our view a little bit as well.
I guess there is another side to this. Maybe there are times to be one or more of those three Ps. We're not dismissing them altogether. There might be times to say, I'm looking for better ideas. I've heard what some of you think are better ideas. I still think mine's best, for instance. So we're not saying give up all you've ever held, but we're saying be genuinely open to the challenge that somebody might have a better idea than your own sometime.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. It's not saying that any of those are particularly bad or wrong. And I think there are times when we'd move through different ones. Maybe we start off being the scientist and then we move into one of the P positions. I don't know. I think there's scope for all of them, but it's just being a little bit open-minded, especially at the beginning of things.
I don't know Steve Jobs' life story well enough. Maybe that's what he did. He was a kind of scientist. Hey, let's create Apple, the company, the phone, and all the other stuff, the Macintosh, and this sort of stuff. And then he became an advocate for his own product, because you can expect that. He felt very personal about it. Hey, I think my product is the best, and we're going to keep making it better. So when you feel really invested in something, crikey, didn't he just about Apple, for instance? But he was never a businessman first. He was a scientist, an electronic scientist.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm not saying I'm against all of these things. I think it's just being a little bit more aware of there are different positions that could be taken.
Yeah, I think so, and I'd like to think that we're personifying that by our curiosity to say, yeah, this is worth thinking about further and mentioning to others. Yeah, I like that. It's been good co-ideation, as I said earlier. It's another label I picked up from LinkedIn. Someone calls themselves amongst all the learning wizards and gurus, co-ideation. So thank you today for co-ideating with me.
Thank you very much, Andrew.